So today's Cozy Arcade Weekly is going to be a bit different. I want to talk about something that a lot of us may feel but may not be comfortable talking about out loud. So we gonna get into it. We all want game developers to release a polished game, and we don't want them to be overworked, exhausted, or running on fumes. Absolutely not. It's not healthy. But why does it feel like we aren't allowed to just be sad when a game gets pushed back? So the reason this is coming up is because I took the beginning clip from my August Cozy Games video and posted that on my TikTok. This was about the fact that Grave Seasons and The Witch's Bakery were going to be delayed, which is pretty sad considering so many of us were looking forward to those two games, especially Grave Seasons. So many folks in the comments were like, no, this is so sad. And some people were even saying that Grave Seasons was their birthday game, y'all. It felt like a big huddle of us just being sad about the delays, but there weren't any ill feelings towards the developers, just sadness about the games being delayed, right? Then I started getting more and more comments about preferring a polished game over a rushed one, which I was like, facts, that's what we all want. And then comments about letting the developers rest and not overworking them, and I was like, right. And then I wondered why people felt the need to quickly defend the developers, but more so the delays, which is pretty normal in the gaming world. And it's probably because of the difference between entitlement and just sadness. So we've seen plenty of games getting delayed. This is not new. We see it all the time. However, there are two main types of responses from people who handle those delays, maybe three. One response is filled with entitlement, where they feel as though they demand answers and quickly bash the developers when things go awry, like calling the developers lazy. Then there's the other side where people just express genuine sadness over the delays, but are pretty understanding and know that it will come out eventually. They say things like, man, I was really looking forward to playing it this weekend. Now, the third type is just the type who are unbothered by delays entirely. We play games because we love to escape, have something to get our minds off from the daily life struggles, and just relax. And so when there's a game that checks all of your boxes, for the ideal game, it's natural to be upset when the release date gets pushed back. You just really cared about the game and you were looking forward to playing it. So when people come at you with like, just play something else, it disregards your very normal and natural response. Of course, we're gonna play something else. We don't just sit in the corner and rock until the delayed game gets released. People just express their sadness and then move on. Now, I do believe some of this disappointment stems from things like early announcement traps and long development. Listen, short-term delays are one thing, but what happens when a game is announced nearly a decade ago, goes silent, and then gets delayed again? That's where delay fatigue turns into genuine trust fatigue. All right, so we just received news that Grave Seasons was delayed. Sad, but all right, no worries. A delay or two happens in the gaming world. Is very different from like movies where once it's rendered, it's done. Nothing breaks, nothing needs to be corrected. Now, we did have that Sonic incident, but once again, it was reworked before the release and then it was done. Whereas in games, there's constant reworking, bug fixes, you know, like when you go to fix one thing in the game, suddenly 10 more things break and collapse at the same time. So yeah, it's a lot to it. However, where people start blurring the lines between entitlement and genuine sadness is when the developers either A, announce a game way too early, B, delay after delay after delay, or C, there's a long development process with very little communication. This is where genuine sadness is still present, but more and more people become skeptical and do want answers, especially when they're not getting any. Announcing a game too early is such a dangerous trap because that creates expectations, and when you don't follow through, it gets murky. Now, there's a difference between announcing a game's release like time frame and you end up pushing it back a few weeks or a few months, but announcing a game's release day and then pushing it back into the abyss is another. People end up feeling slighted, especially when they were really looking forward to that particular game. Now, some folks expressed that the developers don't owe us anything, and that is so true. We did not help create the game. We weren't in there. We didn't put any hours into the development. We're just gamers waiting to play. However, the goal of the game is to have people play it. And if you've created so much distrust between you and the players, you run the risk of having less and less people invest in your game. For example, I used to do wedding videography, and let's say I would promise their full wedding film like 4 weeks after the wedding, right? Well, what if I constantly push the time back and people aren't getting their wedding films until like 8 weeks later or more? And this becomes a constant thing. I have deadlines, but I rarely meet them. Those couples could give me very poor reviews. And when other folks look me up and see that I never meet deadlines or expect your film to be months late, those people will run from my page so fast. This ends up hurting my ability to get new clients. Now, will there still be people who hire me to film their weddings? Sure, they might not look at the reviews or they just don't care. Just like there will still be people who will invest in the games no matter what. But it definitely still could cause a rift with future players. Now, I know that creating wedding films and creating video games are very different, but my 2 points are that deadlines are important and trust between two parties is also important. A lot of folks also defend these types of developers by constantly saying not to rush them, let them take as long as they need, don't burn them out. Again, no one wants developers to be overworked or burned out by creating something. However, there is a difference between creating for the sake of creating and having a big announcement with a deadline, a release date attached. Now, I made this point in my comments, but just like with my art students, we have to get these projects done. We cannot stay on the same project for the entire year. I know some of them want to, but y'all, we can't. When I first started teaching, I asked a veteran art teacher, who is actually my art teacher in elementary school, what do I do with the students who work really slowly? Do I let them finish however long it takes, or do I have them move on? She said that they had to learn how to produce good work, but also move more quickly, and that we do need to move on. I was like, you're right. Just like with your job, things have to get done. Deadlines are there. You can't just la-di-da your way through the office or nothing would get done. So there is a middle ground between not wanting to be overworked, because none of us want that, but also learning how to meet goals and deadlines. Of course, not all developers push dates back or have long drawn-out development processes or announce constant delays, but it does make sense that when this happens, people get frustrated. Now, delays aren't always bad, of course. Like I said earlier, when it comes to gaming, it's an entirely different process than other forms of entertainment. Games are so fragile sometimes, or a lot of the time, and things break and crash within games so much that end up becoming completely unplayable. A lot of times when developers give a release date, it almost acts more like a placeholder, an optimistic aim that they hope to achieve. Unfortunately, as the time draws near and we get closer to that date, the devs realize, oh my goodness, when I press this button, everyone's in a T-pose and moonwalking down the street. You can't release a game in that state. So you either pray for a miracle for things to be fixed before the deadline, or you push the date back. Like I said earlier, this happens all the time. Games break and mess up all the time. Even really polished games have weird things happen within them. So when developers are pushing the date back, it's definitely to fix problems and release the game in its best state. They have to go through constant play tests in multiple forms in order to ensure that it's in its best state for you. Listen, there's nothing worse than a game being released and it's so unplayable and janky and ruins the first impressions of that game, because people will not rush to pick it back up even when it gets fixed later. So you do need to have a solid, good first impression. It's definitely in how the developers handle this that makes the difference. Delays happen, it's fine. Not all developers are having their audience go on a roller coaster ride, but some of them do, and you know. So this leads to why the community reacts the way that they do. When people were commenting under my TikTok video that they'd rather have a polished game or let the developers take as long as they need, it's probably because they've seen developers getting constantly harassed, even when they aren't creating huge mistrust between the players. They literally would have like one delay announcement and suddenly some people would jump down their throats about it, attaching their feelings towards how other developers handle things and blanketing them in it. So the folks with good intentions, their efforts were to overcorrect or direct the attention elsewhere to prevent that from happening, even when most people in the comments were just simply sad. That overcorrection is where the toxic positivity sneaks in. It creates this false binary where you're either 100% for the devs or you're an entitled gamer, no in between. But two things can be true at the same time. You can want the developers to take care of themselves and create a beautifully polished game while also expressing genuine sadness about a delay and feeling exhausted about long wait times and letdowns. When a game is delayed or you have to wait a little longer, your disappointment is just because you were so excited. Most of us aren't attacking the devs or want them to be miserable. Our disappointment lasts for a moment and then we move on with our lives. So how do you handle delay announcements for games you were really excited about? And are there any games that you're waiting for that's been delayed? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for hanging out with me and discussing this very common topic. If you enjoyed gaming conversations like these, don't forget to give this video a like. It really helps my channel. And also don't forget to subscribe. I would really appreciate it. I hope you have a great rest of your week or weekend, whenever you're watching this, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Bye.